Hi, this is today's lesson, and this lesson is about Black Lives Matter. 3 questions here. Can you think about them and make notes? So pause now, and you can use a dictionary if you need one. Okay. So this lesson, we're going to have some poetry, vocabulary, proofreading, non-standard English, and speaking and writing. Okay. First, some pictures. Have a look at these pictures. Pause the screen and see what you can see and what you think and what you feel about these photographs of the protests. Okay. Some vocabulary here. Do you know all these words? You might like to use those words for talking about those pictures and for this topic. Look through, pause the screen, look up the words, write down the new ones, and make sure you can explain all the words. Okay. Right, we're going to do some reading, and we're going to read about some poets and their poems. This guy is a very famous poet. Read through and find out as much as you can about him. Pause the screen. Okay. Interesting. Did you find any mistakes in that passage? There are 10 mistakes. It's really, really, really important to notice and correct errors. So I hope you noticed some. Okay, let's go back. Can you find the 10 mistakes here? They're just one letter wrong. Pause. Okay, have you found all 10 mistakes? Right, let's check. So it was poets, not poet, plural. Inspired, have inspired, past participle. Influenced, past participle again. Politics is always plural. 10 years old, that's plural. Issues, plural. He spends, that's the third person S, present simple. Human rights, animal rights, they're always plural. And organizations is plural. So you see one letter can make a big difference. You need to check for those final S and D. Okay, would you like to have a poem by Benjamin Zephaniah? He's written a lot of political poems. This one is about Stephen Lawrence, who was killed by the police in the UK. Okay, I'll read it to you. What Stephen Lawrence has taught us. We know who the killers are. We have watched them struck before us, as proud as sick Mussolini's. We have watched them struck before us, compassionless and arrogant. They paraded before us like angels of death, protected by the law. It is now an open secret. Black people do not have chips on their shoulders. They just have injustice on their backs and justice on their minds. And now we know that the road to liberty is as long as the road from slavery. The death of Stephen Lawrence has taught us to love each other and never to take the tedious task of waiting for a bus for granted. Watching his parents, watching the cover-up, begs the question, what are the trading standards here? Why are we paying for a police force that will not work for us? The death of Stephen Lawrence has taught us that we cannot let the illusion of freedom endow us with a false sense of security as we walk the streets. The whole world can now watch the academics and the super cops struggling to define institutionalized racism as we continue to die in custody, as we continue emptying our pockets on the pavements. And we continue to ask ourselves, why is it so official that Black people are so often killed without killers? We're not talking about war or revenge. We're not talking about hypothetics or possibilities. We're talking about where we are now. We're talking about how we live now in this state, under this flag, God save the Queen. And God save all those black children who want to grow up. And God save all the brothers and sisters who like raving. Because the death of Stephen Lawrence has taught us that racism is easy when you have friends in high places. And friends in high places have no use whatsoever when they are not your friends. Dear Mr. Condon, pop out of Teletubby land and visit reality. Come to an honest place and get some advice from your neighbours. Be enlightened by our community. Neglect your well-paid ignorance because we know who the killers are. Okay, you might want to read that again. So pause the first screen now. And pause the second screen now. Sometimes you need to read poems a couple of times. And here is a tiny exercise about the features of language in a poem. There are 3 features of language: rhetorical questions, repetitions, and oxymorons, and 3 definitions. Can you pause the screen and match? Okay. So 1 is C, 2 is A, and 3 is B. Okay, I want you to look back at the poem now to see if you can find these 3 features of language. Ready? So pause now here. And pause here. Did you find any? Okay. So, who was George Floyd? I want you to read this to find out. Pause the screen now to read. Okay. Did you notice the mistakes that time? Is your proofreading improving? There are only 5 mistakes, so have a look. Can you find the 5? Pause the screen until you do. Okay. Here are the mistakes. 46-year-old, not years old, is the adjective there. Article by a white police officer. Until he died, past simple, not past perfect. To demand, and worldwide, not in worldwide. Okay. Right. The second poet now. I want you to read about Maya Angelou. She's an author and poet. So pause the screen to read about this poet now. Okay. Did you notice any mistakes? There are only 2 errors in this one. Can you find them? Pause until you find them. Okay. Okay, these are the mistakes. When she was very young and were sent. Okay, not when she is and were send. Okay. Okay, the poem is talking about painful history. What do you think she means? So let's read the poem now. Here's the poem, just 1 slide. Pause and you read the poem to yourself. Okay. Okay, ready? Very powerful poem. And the last poet is George the poet. Where's he from? Okay, find out a bit more about him. Read this. Pause the screen. Okay. Did you find any errors in that one? Only 2. Okay, found the errors? Okay, so the errors are It's a social commentator, singular, and you will be reading the future continuous. Okay. Right, so this poem you're going to read by George the poet is about his life. So here are 7 events from his life. I want you to think about the order of these events first. So pause the screen and put them in order. And now you need to read the poem. Okay, so you need to pause each screen while you're reading it. Pause this screen now. Okay, and the second screen, pause this now. Okay, next one, pause this now. And ready? The last one is this. Okay, interesting poem. It's like spoken word poetry. Now, I want you to look back and see if you can find any slang, so street language. For example, in the opposite part here, the word bruv, I saw it, bruv. Bruv is slang for brother. Do you know much about slang in English? See if you can find any more. Okay, so pause again, find some slang. And the next. And next. And next. Okay, which words did you find? Okay, so here are lots of the words, the slang words that came up in that poem. What do you think about slang? Is it wrong English? Is it acceptable on the street? Is it the right English for those contexts of gangs? So you can find out all the meanings in this Urban Dictionary. If you look it up or Google Urban Dictionary, you can find out the meanings of all those words and then go back over those poems again. Okay. So if you want to read any more about the poets, you can Google them, look them up. You can get the piece by George the poet about coronavirus or more Benjamin Zephaniah. And you can listen to them reading their own poems, which is lovely. You can read more about Black Lives Matter on the EE Wiki or blacklivesmatter.com. Or you can read about the diversity Black Lives Matter dance that they did on the television programme Britain's Got Talent that many people complained about. Okay, last thing is your writing. You've got a choice this week, and you can choose to write a poem, an informal letter, a formal letter, or an article. Okay? And one thing to remember is the language you need to use for level 2 writing. So just a reminder, try to use some modal verbs. You've got examples here. Try to use some conditionals and try to use some passives. And you've got examples here of sentences. Okay, that's all for this video.